that meeting in the Vatican was important because it wasn't distorted by any of the advisors, because you have to remember that Trump's inner circle is a very interesting group of people with different worldviews and different approaches to every single problem, and they're all characters, and similar things could be said about President Zelensky. So the fact that they were face-to-face and one-on-one was important. But once again, the most important thing now, President Trump is adamant to build this world where the strong kind of rule the weak. It's blatant, it's obvious. And, if you consider his psyche and his personality, a certain degree of narcissism there, and I'm underestimating by a wide margin there. In that world, his first test as to how strong he is, whether he's strong enough for Putin, comes right after the final signature on that deal, even before it's ratified by the parliament, even before Ukraine's parliament starts changing legislation to make that deal work, because that's another step that needs to be taken, and it's going to take a while.
Alistair, we can now both talk to our next guest, Igor Novikov. He used to advise President Zelensky on America issues. Good afternoon, and welcome, and thank you for joining us, Igor.
Hello, John. Hi.
Good to have you here. Can I ask you, first of all, Igor, look, you are, as I know from previous conversations, pretty well plugged in with what's going on in the president's office and in the Ukrainian parliament. This minerals deal, which we're told is ready to be signed if the Ukrainian parliament want to go along with it, does it look to you, Igor, like a good deal for Ukraine? And if it does, what's good about it?
Well, the deal that I've seen, at least the last version of it, because one thing I said today was, when everyone was getting happy and ecstatic that it was going to be signed, I said, I'll believe it when I see it, that signature. And, there are still some hurdles, as we can see. But the last version of the deal that I saw is actually mutually beneficial and sane, as I called it. So there is no 500 or $100 billion debt assigned to Ukraine. There's equal representation and management of that fund. All the details look sane, and it's less of a minerals deal. It's more of like a framework investment deal on how to rebuild Ukraine, which is good news, obviously. But there's a very interesting nuance. If it gets signed, that will be the test of President Trump to see if he can deliver with Putin, because at the moment, he can blame everything on Ukraine and Zelensky. When that deal is signed and the United States of America has actually got vested interest in Ukraine, if Russia keeps attacking that interest, now it's make or break it for Trump.
Right. So that's a massively important question. But more immediately, Igor, I'm seeing reports this morning that some of President Zelensky's officials have been in direct contact with American officials about precisely that, about targeting some sanctions on Putin in Russia. Can you throw any light on that? Is there any sign of movement on the American side? And I'll get Alistair's view in a second, but do you see any from where you sit?
Well, it doesn't work like that with the Trump presidency. Basically, it's to do with how he feels about the negotiation process, what mood he wakes up in. So regardless of what's being discussed, it will be up to President Trump to decide whether to sanction Russia, to provide extra military assistance if needed to Ukraine, or any other moves to make to show strength to Putin, because let me remind you, Putin only responds to strength.
Right. Alistair, I guess you're going to recognize that picture. What matters when it comes to the now U.S. administration is the mood of the moment, more particularly Donald Trump's mood of the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's changed insofar as Ukraine's concerned over the last few days.
Has it materially?
I think so. In Donald Trump's mind, we've seen much more forceful criticism of Vladimir Putin in recent days. I think that the meeting that he held with Vladimir Zelensky in the Vatican for Pope Francis's funeral at the weekend was significant. The optics of that, as we know, them sitting across in a huge, great big hall. I think certainly the tone has changed on Ukraine since that meeting. He's been much more forceful. in his criticism of Vladimir Putin. We've heard from people like Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, only yesterday afternoon, saying that it could be time for the US to walk away from negotiations on a ceasefire if both sides, not just the Ukrainians, we've said a lot of criticism of the Ukrainians up to this point, if both sides can't sit down and do a deal. And of course now, if this minerals deal does get signed, there is vested interest in Ukraine. America is a partner in a potentially highly lucrative agreement, both for Ukraine and for the US, and it's mutually beneficial. I think that the mood music is changing, but of course the sort of kicker to that, of course, is that it can change again.
Yes.
We know that things can spin on a dime, as they say here, and Donald Trump's attitude to any particular side in this war can change at a moment's notice.
That's a really powerful point, Alistair. I mean, Igor Novikov, Alistair's got a point, hasn't he? If it's that easy to get President Trump to change his mind, sitting, not exactly an everyday circumstance, I accept, sitting together in a couple of chairs in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, but if that was what it took to change his mind, can you still trust what he may say in the future, Igor?
Well, I disagree with the fact that it's that easy to change his mind, because I've been there from day one and I've seen the arc of their relationship with Zelensky develop. It's not as simple as people think. So it's not a love-hate relationship. And, for example, one thing I said today, that it's a common misconception that Zelensky actually dislikes President Trump. There's a lot of sympathy there, latent sympathy. So,
really, yeah.
It's a long story, but that meeting in the Vatican was important because it wasn't distorted by any of the advisors, because you have to remember that Trump's inner circle is a very interesting group of people with different worldviews and different approaches to every single problem, and they're all characters. And similar things could be said about President Zelensky. So the fact that they were face-to-face and one-on-one was important. But once again, the most important thing now, President Trump is adamant to build this world where the strong kind of rule the weak. It's blatant, it's obvious. And, if you consider his psyche and his personality, a certain degree of narcissism there, and I'm underestimating by a wide margin there. In that world, his first test as to how strong he is, whether he's strong enough for Putin, comes right after the final signature on that deal, even before it's ratified by the parliament, even before Ukraine's parliament starts changing legislation to make that deal work, because that's another step that needs to be taken, and it's going to take a while. But once kind of that minerals deal is out of the way, now it's up to Trump to show whether he's strong enough. And if he fails in that, he becomes unpredictable.
Okay, there's a lot there I wish I could dig into further, especially taken by the idea that President Zelensky actually quite likes Donald Trump. That was new on me. We'll have to take that up on a future conversation. Igor Novikov, thank you so much. Alistair Dorby, lovely to see you, mate. We'll see you.
Thank you.
We'll talk again soon here in Washington, D.C.